Hey everybody. Happy Thursday. So we're just a few days away from the AP Lang exam. So I figured I would go live again on both YouTube and TikTok. So just waiting for people to log on. If you're just joining, feel free to ask any questions that you have. Last night we had lots of great questions. I actually said last night I was only going to stay on for a short amount of time, and then I ended up staying on for like 90 minutes. However, tonight it really will be a short one. It'll just be a 30-minute live. So feel free to ask any questions that you have. Hi. Oh, hey Tom, how are you? So yeah, feel free to just jump on, ask questions that you have. Last night we had lots of questions about like all the common things, but we had lots of questions about like multiple choice and synthesis. Argument, I think, were some of the popular questions. So thank you for liking the live as well. Is it bad to reference pop culture in the argument essay? That's a good question. Honestly, no. Some teachers prefer that you don't. I will say that. My personal philosophy is that if it's the best example you can give and it's the most convincing example, then go for it. But I will say this with especially with pop culture, but this really applies to pretty much any evidence you give anyway. Um, Make sure that you're actually explaining who the person is or the event or things like that, because otherwise your reader might not know. So it's really good to have a couple sentences where you actually explain what you're talking about, even if it's somebody famous, and then give even more sentences, like 3 to 5 sentences of commentary about why it's significant. But yeah, you can talk about pop culture. Some teachers prefer that you don't, but I've had some students like be really good at writing about pop culture. So if it's something you're knowledgeable about and it's the best idea you've got, I say go for it. I'd rather have you do that than write about like a historical example that you don't really know about. Just had stats and now I'm on the Lang grind. Yeah, I know a lot of people have a push tomorrow as well. More power to you for taking stats because I'm not a math person. Let's put it that way. Are there any important tones I should remember so I can use them in rhetorical analysis? Not necessarily for your rhetorical analysis essay, but there are a couple tone words that might be beneficial to know for multiple choice. So those would be colloquial, which is basically like an informal, kind of casual slang tone. They can also turn that into a noun. So they could say colloquialism, which is like essentially like slang or informal language. Another tone word that sometimes comes up on multiple choice is ingratiating, which is basically kind of like flattery. It's like you're fawning over someone. So like you're really sucking up to them. I'm not saying those are going to be the answer, but it's good to know what those words mean. And then there's words that I think a lot of people are familiar with, but like patronizing, which means like you're being very like critical and condescending. And then forthright is like bold. That's another one that comes up. So those are some tone words for multiple choice that you might want to know. I wanted to ask you about body paragraph choice. I was thinking of doing 2 body paragraphs for argument in order to make more space for synthesis. Is that okay? Yes, I honestly 2 body paragraphs is fine, especially if you're really developing those paragraphs. So if you feel like you want to put more time in any 1 or 2 of your essays, and somehow the other essay is just going to have 2 body paragraphs, that's fine. I know some students write 3, but a lot of my students write 2 body paragraphs anyway. So with 2, just make sure you're really developing them, but it's fine. Yeah, I think this isn't rhetorical. That's totally okay. Awesome. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to like the live. And also, if you're watching on TikTok, please do me a favor and just tap your screen a few times. I'm only going to be on until about, well, I'm on Central Time, so about 8:55 because I have to tutor at 9. So it'll be a quick live tonight because I said that last night and I stayed on for like 90 minutes. We only write 2 bodies in class. It's heavily enforced. Yeah, honestly started essentially teaching 2 body paragraphs. When I first started teaching, I had a lot more students do 3, and then they just kept telling me like it's really hard to get to 3 in 40 minutes. And I just kind of realized, you know what, like it's probably better if I just start with 2. So like with my sophomores that I teach, um, it's rare that I require 3 body paragraphs. It's usually I require 2. Let's see. I always score 4 and a 6 on an essay. Should I focus on MC or focus on trying to prove the essays? It kind of depends on what you have access to. Also what your existing multiple choice score is now. Because if your existing multiple choice is around like half of them, like maybe 23 to like 27, I would say it would be good to focus on multiple choice to see if you can earn a couple more points. And if you're getting 4 out of 6s on your essays and you're trying to improve, pick the one you're best at. So I would say don't try to improve on all 3 essays. But to get from a 4 out of 6 to a 5 out of 6, it's really about usually the evidence and commentary. So pick the one that you're best at and really focus on what can I do to get there? And the answer is typically consistency and uniformity. So if you're getting a 4 out of 6, usually it means that one body paragraph is really strong and it meets expectations and the other one is so-so. So you want to figure out, okay, what can I do to get both paragraphs to be equal caliber? And so figure out which one's your strongest. And sometimes you might already know, like, oh, I really like rhetorical analysis. Or it might be a certain prompt, like on test day, you might be like, oh, I actually like this prompt. I have more to say about it. So I would say you could put your attention in multiple choice, but I would also say pick one of the 3 essays and really focus on having 2 solid body paragraphs. I wouldn't really worry about sophistication because it is rare. It's possible, don't get me wrong, but it's rare enough that it's not where I would be putting my energy. I wanted to ask how I could possibly improve my rhetorical analysis essay. I'm struggling to remember the devices. No, you don't really need to memorize devices. Ask yourself, what is the writer doing? So, for instance, yes, there are devices like repetition, comparison, anecdote. I have a video, it's from a couple years ago. It's from the COVID year that I did like, because it's super requested. People wanted to know like what devices are most common. So I did that and I've been meaning to update it, but I don't think I'll be able to do it justice before this year's exam because I literally did it like the night before the 2020 test. So it's on my list for next year, but I do think that that video could be valuable for you this year, but there are some common devices that come up frequently. But there's also times where students are like, I don't see any devices. Like I don't see any choices. I don't know what's here. In which case there's always word choice and tone, but also sometimes we get so attached to like, where's the repetition or where's the comparison? And we need to ask ourselves, what are they doing? So are they acknowledging something? Because that's a choice. You could write about that. What are they acknowledging? Why are they acknowledging it? You could write about flattery, criticism. Are they trying to rally the crowd and unify them? That kind of boils down to purpose as well, but you could write about it very actively. So I would also, if I were you, look up what we call rhetorically accurate verbs. There's going to be a huge list of them. So if you're going through it and you're like, I don't think I would really normally write about that, just ignore it on the list. Like maybe choose like 10 rhetorically accurate verbs to add to your repertoire. And that could also help you as well. But I do have videos on YouTube of the most frequently used choices, in my opinion. It is an older video, but I think it would still help. I have videos about what a rhetorical choice is, and that video I think has kind of similar information and it's a little bit more newer. So you might like that video as well. My AP teacher told me my essay was good, but my language wasn't the best. Honestly, these essays are viewed as a rough draft, so I know what your teacher's saying in the sense that like I've probably thought the same thing at times, but it's viewed as a rough draft. I would say try to avoid lower level words like good, bad, thing, stuff, huge, really, very, and then maybe try to, if you have time as you're writing or if you have time to proofread, which not everybody really does, try to find words that you could replace with a synonym that's a little bit stronger. I don't think you need to like memorize a bunch of words to try to sneak into your essay. I do think verbs are important though. So those rhetorically accurate verbs I was talking about. And then there's some words that I think can help your essay in general. So verbs like highlights, illustrates, underscores, which means emphasizes, portrays, conveys, demonstrates. Those aren't like super fancy words, but they can lead into commentary. So those could help your language as well. Does the College Board grade essays more strictly than teachers? No, and actually in a lot of cases, I feel like they're more lenient because, and I say this because we are told at the reading that this is not our classroom. We're not grading essays, we're scoring them. So the difference is usually when teachers grade essays, we're looking for, I guess we're looking for deductions. Whereas with scoring, you're trying to reward people for what they do well. So just because in my classroom, I would prefer like that students, for example, I tell my students when you use the word this, I want a noun after it. This what? So this example, this quote, this anecdote, whatever it is. Um, on the exam, if I'm scoring, I'm not gonna mark that. I'm not gonna like take points off for that because it's not my classroom, if that makes sense. So it's just like one small example. So we reward students for what they do well, and we have a rubric to follow. So for a lot of teachers, they grade more harshly in the classroom to kind of elevate the standards and to hold students accountable. But then on the exam, readers might grade a little bit more leniently. That being said, good writing is good writing, and poor quality writing is poor quality writing. So it's not like everybody grades more easily. And honestly, a lot of us really do, as teachers, we really try to be accurate to the rubric. Like we try to give you a very accurate experience, and we're not trying to be harder on you. What do you do if you can't think of any examples for the argument essay? Remember that you can pull examples from current events, history, outside knowledge like pop culture. You can write about personal experience. So try to think of something and go with what you've got. I know that's not like super helpful, but surely you can come up with something. So whatever you decide, make it work. Remember that a good argument essay is going to have specific evidence. So you want to make sure you have concrete names, dates, or places if you can. If it's not an exact date, like a decade or something, or an era, give a couple sentences explaining who the person is or whatever. And then like 3 to 5 sentences of commentary if you're doing like one example per paragraph. All right, so we got a question about, will the grader take into consideration my spelling mistakes? Not to penalize you. As long as we can read your essay, you're fine. And when I say read your essay, please understand that we have students that have dyslexia. We have students for whom English is their second language. So like we don't take points off for spelling. It says something about spelling and grammar on the bullet points on each page, but like here's the other thing that I wish people would understand, not students, but just like in general, is like as teachers, even though we're English teachers, we still make typos too. We're still human. So like when I was a first year teacher, I would correct like every single spelling mistake. And then I was like, why am I bothering? It's much more important to have good content. How do I get better at the MC? How should I study it? So you want to try to figure out, are you better at the reading or the multiple choice? The writing multiple choice. Most students are better at the writing multiple choice. So if you know that you're struggling with a certain type of question, you can definitely work on those. I would use released SAT tests to practice because they're from the College Board. I know they're not the exact same as AP Lang, but if you could use an SAT passage for reading that's nonfiction, that can kind of help. Most of the questions are going to be similar, so it could be good practice. I think the writing questions, which are usually like in the writing and language SAT, they're transition words, or should the writer add a sentence? Should the writer delete a sentence? Things like that. I think those are a little bit easier to like learn from, if that makes sense. I do have an updated video on my channel from a couple weeks ago where it's about AP Lang MCQ tips. It's a pretty thorough video. I'm not able to show actual questions because of copyright, but I do give several tips in that video. And I would love it if you would check that out. It's on my YouTube channel. I hope it has some good advice. Thank you for sharing the live, by the way. Just to do a quick time check, more for myself than for you all. It's about 8:40 my time, and I have to tutor at 9. So I've got about a little less than 20 minutes. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. And if there's like repeat questions, if people in the chat know the answer, like if you know that I've already said it and you want to help others out by saying, here's the answer, that's totally fine. Appreciate the help. How do you practice selecting suitable examples? One thing you want to make sure is like, can I write about it specifically? So when I say specifically, because that's a term in the rubric, but sometimes it's kind of a vague term. Like it's like, okay, what do you mean by that? You want to be able to write about it knowledgeably and be able to provide details. A lot of times people write about things somewhat specifically where they kind of have an idea of who the person was, but it's like kind of general. Like for instance, if I was to talk about somebody really common, like Rosa Parks, okay, and if I just say, Rosa Parks was a person who refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus, and that led to a bus boycott. Okay, that is somewhat specific because what I said was true, but it wasn't super detailed. Like, I didn't really wow anybody with my knowledge of Rosa Parks in that sentence. So we want to be as specific as possible. And I think that's sometimes the downfall is that people, especially if we're talking about people that are kind of common, we assume that the reader knows who they are. So we don't add in those extra details. You want to pretend like they don't know. Should I read the passage first or the question first, or possibly both regarding the MCQ? I would try it like with an SAT test and see which technique you like. I was never told to read the questions first as a student. I wish I was, because the way I take a test, I sometimes get like distracted. Like, I could be reading the passage and I could be thinking about something else and still reading the passage. I don't really know how that works, but I've asked my students if they can do that sometimes, and they say yes. So apparently it's somewhat normal, because I'm not the only one who does that. But I also, if I'm not super interested in it, it's hard. And so I found in grad school, when I would read the questions first, I was able to read with a purpose. And so I did this with my students in preparation for our state testing. We did like an ACT prep. And one of the questions was, why did the character not invite this other character in for coffee? So we just read the question, didn't look at the answer choices, because, they're wrong. Most of them are wrong anyway. Only one is right. And so we looked through all of them, all the questions, and then kind of started going through the passage, just reading it, whatever. And as soon as we got to the line about so-and-so didn't invite so-and-so in for coffee, it was like, oh, okay, there's the answer right away. So it was super easy to go answer that multiple choice question when the time came. However, if we had just read the passage, I honestly don't think that we would have paid attention to the detail of the person not inviting the other person in for coffee, because like it wouldn't have seemed relevant to me. It wouldn't have seemed significant. So for some people, reading the questions first really does help for the reading multiple choice. However, I've had plenty of students be like, nope, it doesn't work for me. So please try it out. Don't do it on exam day without trying it out, but see what's best for you. All right, let's see. We got a few people joining. Welcome. Feel free to ask questions if you have them. I'll be live for about another little less than 15 minutes. Sorry to cut it really short tonight, but I have to tutor at 9 my time. Thank you for the likes as well. I probably missed some questions on TikTok, so let me just scroll. Is it worth trying for the sophistication point? In some sense, yes, because if you try for it but don't get it, it still makes your essay better. There's been times where like I've given my students an exercise where I wanted them to try a certain thing to write a more sophisticated essay. And even if they wouldn't have gotten the sophistication point on the exam, usually it led to better style, even if it wasn't totally sophisticated, or it led to better commentary. So in that sense, I do think it's worth trying for, because if you don't achieve it, your essay is still better, if that makes sense. Tips for time management and synthesis. So going through the sources specifically, I would say if you know you're not going to use the source, skip it. Or if you know it doesn't fit your argument and you don't intend to do any kind of counter argument because it's not required, skip it. If you get a visual text kind of early on, like either source A or source B, and you're looking at it and you're like, I don't know how to use this, I don't know what this is, skip it and come back to it. Because sometimes the visual text makes more sense after you've read the other sources, because you know how it fits into the conversation. So don't panic, just come back to it. If a source is really long and you feel like you're pressed for time, or if you feel like you're a slow reader, read the first paragraph and then look at the topic sentences of the other paragraphs. Unless, of course, all the paragraphs are super short, because I gave my students that advice. And then there was this one long article that we were looking at, but like there were like 10 paragraphs and they were all like one sentence. So the whole read the topic sentence thing didn't totally help. However, the idea behind it is that the topic sentence conveys the main idea of the paragraph. So if you just read the topic sentences, it's a way to get the gist of what it's about. And you can decide, yes, I want to keep reading it more closely, or no, I've got the gist. Also take good notes. Not necessarily like underlining and circling a ton of stuff. I tell my students, look for facts, statistics, real world examples, and expert testimonials, because those are all very logical, or they can build a logical argument, and like little quotes that you think you can weave into an essay. But it is good to make, when I say notes, it's good to make like a chart or something maybe, or at least to plan like, here's main idea 1 and here are the sources that I'm going to use for it. that those kinds of things can help you stay organized. So sometimes less is more with synthesis, um, at least in my opinion. Thank you for following as well. If you aren't following me, hi, I'm Coach Hall. If we haven't met yet virtually, I'm an AP Lang teacher from Arkansas. I started a YouTube channel about 4 years ago, and I started TikTok, I think 2 years ago. And I give AP Lang tips. I'm an AP reader, and I have had a few other AP Lang related titles as well. So feel free to ask whatever questions you have. We've got about 10 minutes before I have to head to tutoring. And I will be going live. I don't know if I can go live tomorrow, but I will be going live Saturday and Sunday, and also plenty Monday night because of the exam. And I have tons, like I said, tons of video content if you need tips. It would really help me if you look at some of my old content as well. Let's see. Is it true that usually the words are difficult to understand are usually wrong? That's a good question. I haven't really looked into that super closely. So I don't want to say yes or no because, like, honestly, like I think you mean for like a multiple choice question. So I don't know actually. Like because I feel like the questions I'm thinking of, it's kind of like a 50-50 one. So I don't know. That is a good question though. My teacher says there's a possibility for Q3 to be economic related. Do you think that's true? I mean, technically it could be about anything. They wrote the exam questions at least a few years ago, maybe up to 5 years ago. And I say that because apparently they make like 5 tests at once. There's like a committee and they're not going to do anything about like COVID or any, like now granted, could the prompt be open-ended and could you write about COVID? Yes, but they're not going to ask you like a COVID prompt or something. They keep it like super open-ended. So it's possible that the prompt could be about any open-ended topic, but they didn't write the prompt this year. So they're not trying to purposefully give you a current topic, if that makes sense. You can write about current events, but like they're not like right now the economy is not that great. I feel like I could say that with it just as a statement. But so it's not like the College Board was like, oh, the economy is not doing so well. Let's make an economic prompt. Like they made whatever prompt y'all get, they made multiple years ago. Can you explain how to do the to what extent? The way I like to think of to what extent, I don't know if this visual is helpful, but I do it for my students. See if I can draw it. I don't know. It's not super fancy. But here's the thing. Okay, so it's literally like a double-sided arrow. You really can't see that. Hold on. Not that you can't imagine what a double-sided arrow looks like. Kind of like a continuum. So here's the thing about to what extent. Okay. So we want to avoid, if this is our arrow, we want to avoid saying always and never because those are two extremes. Right. So we also don't want to be exactly in the middle and have one paragraph that's kind of like a yes and one that's a no. But the thing is you want to figure out, okay, where am I on this? Like, is my dot here? Like, is my position here? Because then you're like, okay, maybe most of the time, yes, but not all the time kind of thing. So when you think of to what extent, it's kind of like a continuum in the sense that you need to figure out, okay, when is this suitable? When is it not? Do I mostly agree? Do I somewhat agree? That kind of thing. So I don't know if that visual was even at all helpful, but when the prompt says to what extent, in class, what I have my students do is I draw that on the board and I have them write their thesis on a Post-it and they stick it on the board, like on the continuum, like where it goes. And usually they all have really similar opinions. So they're all kind of clustered in the same spot. I like your channel. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I hope it's helpful. And yes, please, if people are asking questions that I'm not able to get to quickly, or maybe I've already answered it, please help each other out in the comments. Just because I am a little bit short on time, I promise I will come back over the weekend and answer more questions. What should we consider if we're trying to aim for the sophistication point? Try to figure out how you're going to go get it, if that makes sense. So the most common way for rhetorical analysis is usually like a really thorough analysis of the rhetorical situation. The next most common is analyzing complexity and tension. Some prompts really lend themselves to that and other prompts really don't. The least likely way that we see it, or the least common, is the vivid and descriptive style. That doesn't mean you can't get it that way. But some things to focus on for that one include colons, dashes, and semicolons appropriately. That doesn't mean use a ton of them, but use them in a meaningful way. I do have videos on my channel about how to do that, and they're pretty quick videos if you're curious. Um, and then add in adjectives and adverbs because that's going to make your writing more precise. You can also make rhetorical choices. And this kind of goes for all the essays. Like I have a student who she we saw like an essay that did this and she really liked the technique, so she's kind of made it her own now. For some of her argument essays, not all of them, she will start with a personal anecdote that is related to the topic, and then she'll build into her thesis. So it's kind of like a narrative opening, and then it kind of goes into a more traditional argument structure. It really works for her. I have other students that approach does not work for, but this student is kind of more of like a creative writer anyway. So for her, she tries to go for sophistication with that vivid and descriptive style. So just kind of, if you're close to sophistication, I would read essays if you haven't already done so. Read essays from the College Board that did score the sophistication point, that like did earn it, and kind of see what did they do and kind of figure out from there, like what can I try? Let's see if we got any questions on YouTube. Oh, you're so welcome, Saved by the Bell. Thank you so much. What's the best way to study for multiple choice? At this point, I really like to give students SAT questions. Not all of them are going to match up with AP Lang questions, but there are multiple release SAT tests from the College Board, so there's a lot more practice material. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of AP Lang MCQ that's out there that's official, and I feel like some of the test prep stuff that's out there is not totally aligned with the test. So I usually have my tutoring students use the SAT. But like I said, not every question works. So for reading, you're going to want to focus on the SAT nonfiction passages. There's going to be some questions on the SAT that might have a graph about, like a graph that they're asking about. Ignore those if you're just doing AP Lang, because you don't have multiple choice about graphs. And then sometimes it'll say like, what is the best evidence? For the previous question, you technically don't have to worry about those either because there's no evidence questions like that on the AP test. But a lot of the questions are similar. Excuse me. I feel like AP Lang MCQ is so much harder than the SAT. It can be. One of the things that kind of makes AP Lang seem hard too is that they have 5 answer choices. My students take the ACT, and I had access to a lot of ACT stuff, and then whoever was in charge of the link took it down, which is unfortunate. And there aren't as many ACT resources out there, but we used a lot of we took a break from AP Lang MCQ and we did a lot with ACT because it's our state test. And it has helped. Like they felt like there was overlap, but again, it's not 100%. But something's better than nothing, I think. Okay. How much time do you recommend for each section of the MCQ? If you're using your full hour, no more than 35 minutes for the reading and about 25 for the writing, because I feel like people are a little bit slower on the reading, even though it's kind of like half and half. I do have several students that this year are way better at the writing MCQ. So their plan, because we made a game plan in class the other day, an individualized plan for everybody, is to start with those. So they're going to turn in their booklets to passage 3. It's going to say this is a draft, and they're going to know it's the writing, and they're going to start there because they're better at those. And so I don't want them to rush the questions that they're good at, because quite frankly, if you're not super accurate with the reading, if you're I get 50 to 60%, but you're oh, I get 80% of the writing. I don't want you to rush the stuff you're good at, rush the stuff that you're not so good at, because we're trying to earn as many points as possible. So that's just something to think about as far as timing. And if time is about to run out, just bubble in something. It doesn't matter what it is, bubble in something. It's myth that C is the most popular answer. I don't know how accurate it was, but I saw a study that said it's either A or D. And then B is the third most common. I feel like they're all equal though. Like I actually did that once. I went through all the release tests that I had access to and I tallied up how many of each answer choice there were, and they were all basically even. Like it was only like one or two off. So let's see. All right, I've got like 2 minutes left before I've got to head to tutoring. So okay, when it says the value of like the significance or the importance of, like why does it matter? Like why is it significant? So they might ask you the value of something or the role of something, and they could technically use that wording in uh, the synthesis or the argument. So if they ask you like what is the value of public libraries, they've already done that one, but well, why are they valuable? Well, they help citizens have access to literacy. They have classes for all ages. So, like, why are they valuable? Why are they helpful or beneficial or important? So, yeah, think about it that way. Like, why are they important or helpful? Instead of saying valuable, that might help you. When is the next live? I don't think I can go live tomorrow because I have multiple tutoring sessions back to back. However, I will be able to go live Saturday. I don't know exactly what time. And I will definitely be live for sure Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern because that's my usual time that I've been going live each week. I'll probably go live twice Sunday. I will also be live Monday. So I'm going live on YouTube on the Garden of English, which is not my channel. It's my friend Tim Friedis's channel. We've been doing some studies. We do this like every year. We do like a cram before the exam study thing. I'm going to see if because we're going to be on his channel. I'm going to see if I can go live on TikTok at the same time and just kind of flip my camera and like so y'all would get the audio. If that doesn't work, I'll just go on live like later on TikTok. Like I basically will probably be up till midnight the night before the exam trying to answer questions. So I will be live. Please make sure you're following with your notifications turned on YouTube and make sure you're following on TikTok as well. If you have questions that I didn't get a chance to answer, I sincerely apologize. I so appreciate you coming in and asking questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to them. If you have a question that you would like answered, please go to a recent TikTok video of mine and ask your question, and I'll do my best to respond because if you have the question, other people probably do as well. So thank you all for participating. I do have a tutoring session that I have to get to, so I have to cut this short, but I will be live at some point on Saturday. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody. And if you're taking APUSH tomorrow, good luck. You're going to do great. Bye, TikTok. All right. And bye, everybody on YouTube. Thank you.